Welcome back to Under Baobab Skies, the show where stories from under the big fig tree meet yours. Tonight, we venture into the realm of the Swahili spice merchants, where fortunes were made and lost on the tides of the Indian Ocean, where every sunrise held the promise of adventure and every sunset brought tales of distant lands. Tonight, let us sit back and listen to the whispers of the past as we sail the dhows of time, carrying spices and secrets across the endless blue. The night is still. The sea whispers against the coral shores of Zanzibar, and the scent of cloves hangs in the warm evening air. Imagine yourself seated on a carved wooden bench in a coastal courtyard, the moonlight casting silver shadows across whitewashed walls. Somewhere beyond the garden, the waves lap against the stone docks, where wooden dhows rest, their sails tied down like folded wings of seabirds. An elderly Swahili man sits on the bench. His white kanzu, a traditional long white robe, flows around him like a waterfall. A red fez, a knitted cap adorned with tassels and jewels, sits atop his head, marking him as a man of faith and distinction. His face, a roadmap of his life, is etched with the wisdom of years spent at sea and the calm of one who has seen many sunrises. In his hands, he holds a carved wooden staff, its head taking the shape of a fish, a symbol of his connection to the sea. Around us, the night deepens and the scent of frangipani and jasmine fills the air. We are surrounded by the soft glow of lanterns, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Distant voices carry on the night breeze, mixing with the rhythmic lull of the waves. It feels like time itself slows down, like the gentle sway of the palm trees in the courtyard. Then, as if sensing our curiosity, the old man begins to speak, his voice like the rustling of aged parchment, each word a treasure. He speaks of a time when the ocean was their highway and the stars their guide, when the moon was their companion and the wind their confidant. His eyes, though dimmed with age, still sparkle with the spirit of adventure, reflecting the countless tales held within them. He tells us about his life as a Swahili spice merchant, a profession that was more than just a job. It was a way of life. These men were not just traders, they were navigators of the unknown, explorers of distant shores, ambassadors of cultures, and storytellers of the world. They braved the wrath of the Indian Ocean, wrestled with unruly winds, and played a deadly game of cat and mouse with pirates. Their ships, the dhows, were their homes, their workplaces, and sometimes their only sanctuary. These vessels, crafted from the sturdy wood of the makwaju tree, were as familiar to them as the lines on their palms. The dhows were as much a part of their identity as the intricate patterns of the kanga, a colorful Swahili cloth worn by women. Life as a spice merchant was a gamble, a high-stakes game of chance. One wrong move could mean losing not just your fortune, but your life. Storms could rise unexpectedly, smashing waves against the dhow and threatening to drag them down into the ocean's hungry depths. Fellow traders turned rivals in the blink of an eye, ready to cut you out of the market or worse. And then there were the pirates, lurking like sharks in uncharted waters, always ready to feast on unsuspecting merchant ships. But even with these perils, the allure of the open sea and the promise of untold riches lured many into this dangerous profession. After all, what is life without a bit of adventure? And how can one truly live under the baobab skies and not dream of faraway lands? The Swahili spice merchants were a breed apart, men who chased the horizon, danced with danger, and wrote their own destinies on the vast canvas of the Indian Ocean. You are now under baobab skies, and the story begins. Now, by the end of this part, you'll understand what it truly meant to risk your life as a Swahili spice merchant, to sail fragile wooden dhows across unpredictable seas. to face storms, pirates, and betrayal, all for the promise of fragrant wealth. The merchant's day began not with the sun, but with the tides. In Zanzibar and Kilwa, the call to prayer echoed over narrow stone streets as men gathered on the docks, rolling barrels of water and sacks of dried fish onto creaking decks. Merchants checked their manifests by lantern light, tallying the goods. Ivory tusks, polished like moonlight, woven mats from the hinterland, and sacks of black pepper. But the most treasured cargo was cloves. So delicate, they perfumed the very planks of the ship. It was an age when empires dreamed of reaching Asia overland or by sea. But for East African city-states, trade across the Indian Ocean was as old as the monsoon winds. Swahili merchants plied the same routes generation after generation, linking the Hadramaut and Mogadishu, the Persian Gulf, and the eastern Congo rainforest. They traded in luxury goods and ideas, as well as gold, ivory, and slaves. And the heart of this network was the clove, whose fragrance masked the stink of decay and disease. From the island of Mogadishu, where cloves grew wild, to the courts of Cairo and the bazaars of Baghdad, the price of these brown buds could bring a fortune. Clove trees, tough as leather and aromatic as smoke, grew only in scattered spots along the eastern coast of Africa, and controlling the trade brought power, prestige, and profit. The small Swahili city of Kilwa boasted it could raise 200 elephant tusks worth of gold each year from clove exports alone. But the journey to distant markets took months, forcing merchants to brave the wrath of the Indian Ocean. For centuries, the monsoon winds had been both a gift and a curse, carrying ships swiftly across the warm waters. But, if misjudged, they could drive a fleet onto coral reefs or strand them for weeks in windless waters. Merchants memorized the rhythms of waves and followed the stars to navigate. Now, more than ever before, their lives depended on the subtle signs of nature. To sail the monsoon, merchants and sailors alike left in late summer when winds from the northeast pushed them westward. They raced toward the Hadramaut, a port on Yemen's south coast where they hoped to arrive before the rains. From there, they turned south, relying on the southwest monsoon to carry them to India and Southeast Asia. The journey was fraught with peril, though merchants had little choice but to follow the winds. Sometimes traveling hundreds of miles off course, storms could appear out of nowhere, catching sailors by surprise. Pirates lurked just offshore, and the constant threat of drowning overshadowed every other danger. Those who sailed the monsoon knew that water could be both life source and grave. On a good day, a dhow sliced through turquoise waves, propelled by the wind. Men stood at the front and rear of the vessel, keeping it on course. Inside, others bailed out water that leaked through the seams and patched up any damage caused by stones or stray bits of driftwood. Passengers shared stories, prayers, and food, while the Swahili sailor at the helm kept a sharp lookout for land. When the call came to furl in the sails, the crew scrambled up the mast. Men hauled down the triangle-shaped cloth, secured it on deck, and prepared the dhow for anchoring. Once in port, merchants stretched their aching muscles, thankful to be on solid ground once more. Some disembarked to pray at the local mosque, while others stayed on board, negotiating prices with brokers and agents. When the time came to set sail again, sailors and passengers clambered aboard. The anchor was lifted, the sails unfurled, and the dhow turned toward the horizon, leaving behind the familiar sights and sounds of the last port. At this point in the story, let's meet some characters who are about to embark on a long journey across the Indian Ocean. There was Hassan, an experienced sailor with a weathered face and hands like knotted rope. He knew the monsoon like the back of his hand, and could predict its whims with uncanny accuracy. Then there was Amani, a young apprentice eager to prove himself. His eyes shone with excitement, and his movements were quick and sure as he helped prepare the dhow for the long voyage. Among the passengers were two merchants, Jabir and Salim. Jabir was a seasoned trader with a sharp mind for business. His gaze was keen and his smile was quick, disarming any potential rival with ease. Salim, on the other hand, was a newcomer to the world of trade. He was nervous and unsure, clutching a worn leather pouch close to his chest, hoping it would bring him good fortune. Rounding out the company was a storyteller named Fatima. She had traveled extensively, and her tales were as captivating as the exotic spices she carried. Her voice was rich and melodic, painting vivid pictures of faraway lands and adventures. As the dhow set sail from Kilwa, the passengers settled into their quarters. Jabir and Salim shared one corner, discussing the intricacies of their trade. Meanwhile, Hassan and Amani worked tirelessly to keep the vessel on course. Fortuma found a quiet spot to rest, pulling out a battered book of tales. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in hues of orange and purple, the group gathered on deck. The storyteller began her tales, transporting them all to lands of magic and adventure. Hours passed, filled with laughter, suspense, and wonder. Suddenly, a loud crack split the air. All eyes turned toward the mast. A bolt of lightning had struck, splitting it clean in two. Panic surged through the group as they realized the dire consequences of their predicament. The storm, which had been brewing on the horizon, had arrived swiftly and with a vengeance. Waves crashed over the deck, threatening to capsize the vessel. Rain poured in torrents, blurring their vision and soaking them to the bone. Jabir quickly rallied the passengers. "We need to secure the cargo," he shouted over the wind. "If the goods shift, we could lose our balance and capsize." Together, they struggled to tie down the loose boxes and barrels, battling against the elements. Salim stumbled, dropping a precious pouch. Before he could recover, a wave slammed into the deck, sending the pouch overboard. It disappeared into the churning waters, taking Salim's hopes for a prosperous journey with it. Meanwhile, Hassan and Amani battled to repair the mast. With the storm raging around them, they worked feverishly to make the necessary repairs. But the task seemed impossible as the wind threatened to tear their tools from their grasp. Just when their hopes started to dwindle, a break appeared in the clouds. A sliver of sunlight peeked through the darkness, offering a glimmer of hope. As the storm began to subside, the passengers and crew emerged from their quarters, battered but unbroken. They surveyed the damage to the dhow and their cargo, the full extent of their losses becoming clear. The once vibrant fabrics were now soaked and stained. The fragrant spices had lost their aroma, and the sturdy masts drooped under the weight of their wounds. In the aftermath of the storm, the passengers and crew of the dhow faced a daunting challenge. They had survived the wrath of the monsoon, but now they were stranded in treacherous waters, injured and with damaged goods. The question was, how could they possibly reach land and salvage what remained of their fortune? Their fate hung in the balance as they grappled with this perilous situation, testing their resilience and determination to overcome any obstacle. When the merchants finally reached open waters, the hardships had only just begun. Imagine standing barefoot on the deck of a dhow, the planks warm with midday sun, the salt spray clinging to your skin, and the wind tugging at your robes. Day after day, the horizon was nothing but blue, a circle of water and sky. The ocean gave no rest. Even in calm weather, the work was relentless. Sails had to be trimmed, ropes repaired, and cargo checked. A single mistake could mean disaster. The Swahili sailors and merchants plying the Indian Ocean trade routes between East Africa and the Middle East were legendary mariners. But their skills and seamanship were put to the ultimate test when they ventured forth to distant lands. Storms could shatter a ship as easily as a gourd, tossing men like toys into the churning waves. In the grip of a monsoon, even the sturdiest dhow was but a plaything. The sailors had to cling to the masts and yards, battling not just the elements, but exhaustion, hunger, and thirst. Many a voyage that started with high hopes ended with whispered prayers and clenched teeth as the men rode out the fury of the sea. Food was simple and often unsatisfying. Dried fish, millet porridge, or dates stored in woven baskets. Water was rationed carefully, measured out from clay jars, each sip carrying the weight of survival. Some ships carried water from freshwater wells dug deep into the rock, lining them with lead or stone. But even these supplies ran out quickly, forcing sailors to drink salty seawater, which only added to their misery. Illness stalked the crew: fevers, infected cuts, and exhaustion. And always there was the smell of cloves, strong and sweet, seeping into everything. Clothing, hands, even the skin of the sailors. To outsiders, it smelled of wealth, but to the merchants, it was a constant reminder of the risks they carried. The first whiff of land after weeks at sea brought both relief and anxiety. It meant safety, but also the start of another set of challenges. On shore, life was no less precarious. Merchants who managed to dock in places like Aden, Hormuz, or Calicut found themselves navigating more than markets. They entered webs of politics and suspicion. In bustling ports like these, the Swahili merchants mixed with the rich and powerful, risking envy and resentment. There were rival African traders, the Gujarati merchants from India, the Persian intermediaries from the Gulf, and of course, the Portuguese, an aggressive new player eager to dominate the spice trade. Then there were local rulers, emirs, sultans, and rajas, all with outstretched hands for taxes and tributes. Life in port was a tightrope walk. A friendly smile could bring big profits, but a wrong word could ruin a merchant's name, making future deals impossible. They had to be cautious of cheats, too, for even close friends and family could turn greedy in the heat of a good sale. Let's take the example of a Swahili merchant named Hassan. He arrives in a port city like Aden with his cargo of cloves. As soon as he steps ashore, he has to pay dues to the local authorities just for the right to set foot in the city. Once that's done, he finds a place to store his goods, which comes with its own set of costs and risks. He employs local porters to move his cargo to the marketplace, hoping that they won't pilfer any of his wares. At the market, he meets buyers, some of whom have traveled long distances to purchase the prized African spices. Hassan, however, is not dealing with individual buyers. Instead, he meets with middlemen, agents who will take a cut of his profits for linking him up with the bigger networks. These middlemen have connections all over the Indian Ocean trade network. They know what spices are selling for in distant lands, but they also mark up the price to make a profit for themselves. So Hassan ends up getting less than he hoped for his valuable cargo. Then there are the other merchants, those who have arrived with the same goods that Hassan is selling. They, too, have expenses and losses to account for. If they've come from farther away, their costs have been higher. Now they're competing for the same buyers in a crowded marketplace. To make matters worse, there might be someone here who knows more about the market, who can sell the same quality of cloves for slightly less. Someone who has better connections to get the goods shipped overseas. Hassan feels the pressure. If he doesn't sell his cloves at a decent price, he'll have to endure the scorn of his fellow merchants back home. They'll say he didn't do his homework, that he's not cut out for this risky business. He thinks of his fellow Swahili merchants who have struck it rich, who have built grand houses in Zanzibar, who have married multiple wives. Can he really go back without any profit? He's already spent months on his journey, enduring hunger and thirst, battling storms and sickness. He's taken risks that most people wouldn't dream of. Can he really return empty-handed? As Hassan continues his life in port, he learns that survival depends on a delicate balance. He has to be friendly enough to avoid trouble, but not too trusting to avoid being cheated. He has to bargain hard, yet fairly, to make a decent profit. He has to keep his eyes open for opportunities, but not be distracted enough to ignore danger. It's a precarious dance, but for the sake of his reputation and his livelihood, Hassan must master it. Competition was fierce among Swahili city-states themselves. Kilwa, Mombasa, Malindi, and Zanzibar were allies one year and rivals the next. A merchant who sailed under Kilwa's blessing might find himself banned in Mombasa or taxed double in Zanzibar. Trust was fragile, and loyalty often bent beneath the weight of gold. Aboard the ships, danger lurked in the shadows. Storms could shatter a ship as easily as a gourd, tossing men like toys into the churning waves. In the grip of a monsoon, even the sturdiest dhow was but a plaything. The sailors had to cling to the masts and yards, battling not just the elements, but exhaustion, hunger, and thirst. Many a voyage that started with high hopes ended with whispered prayers and clenched teeth as the men rode out the fury of the sea. It wasn't just the weather. Pirates prowled the ocean, preying on fat merchant vessels. The Swahili sailors were no strangers to such threats. They too had their privateers and buccaneers, and when they weren't fighting the elements or pirates, they were contending with the cargo itself. The spices they traded, especially cloves, were notoriously tricky to store. They had to be kept dry and well ventilated, and even then, damp, rotting cloves could spoil the entire shipment. This meant constant vigilance and careful sorting, a task that fell on the shoulders of the lowest paid crew members, even those who returned to Zanzibar's shores with their cargo intact were not free from struggle. Sultans demanded their share. Tax collectors tallied every bundle, and rivals plotted in silence. A merchant might spend weeks negotiating with local leaders only to watch the price of cloves collapse in a single season, ruined by overproduction or sudden changes in demand. And so, the life of a Swahili spice merchant was never simple. Each journey was a test of endurance, of cunning, of courage. Wealth could be gained, yes, but it was fragile, fleeting as the winds. One storm, one betrayal, one unlucky encounter could undo years of labor. This was the weight of their world. To walk daily along the knife-edged edge of fortune, with the scent of cloves clinging to every breath. By the time a merchant returned home, his body carried the marks of the journey. Salt cracked the skin on his forearms and neck, and the sun had darkened the face, leathery and lined like an old coconut, and nights without rest weighed heavy on his eyes. But the moment he stepped into the narrow, coral-stone streets of Zanzibar or Kilwa, the pressure did not ease. Neighbors watched closely. Success brought envy, and failure brought whispers. Merchants lived with constant debts. To fund a voyage, they often borrowed silver or livestock from wealthy patrons. If fortune failed, repayment became a noose, tightening around their families. A bad season at sea meant not only empty purses, but hungry mouths at home. Even within the household, the strain was clear. Wives and children managed shops, stored goods, and entertained visiting traders while the men were gone. Every delay made the family anxious. A missing dhow meant either great wealth or tragedy. Mothers prayed by oil lamps for safe winds, and children grew up measuring time not by the moon alone, but by whether their father's dhow had returned. But it wasn't just about the money. Religion added another layer to their lives. Merchants were expected to fund mosques, provide alms, and uphold the honor of Islam in their dealings. A dishonest deal could not only shame a man, but stain his faith in the eyes of his community. For every coin earned, there was a moral weight pressing against it. In the end, all that mattered was survival. You could spend decades sailing, bartering, and surviving storms, only for one final voyage to undo everything. Old sailors warned that the sea did not count years, only debts. It took back what it wanted, when it wanted. So to be a Swahili spice merchant was to live with beauty and danger entwined. The very scent of cloves promising fortune, while each breath carried risk. They carved their lives from waves and markets, knowing that survival itself was the greatest treasure. Zanzibar, 1890, Fatma carefully kneaded the dough. The cool water a respite from the stifling heat. Outside, the wind carried the scent of roasting coffee and the murmur of the bustling market. But inside the courtyard, time seemed to slow to a peaceful pace. Her husband, Salim, was away on a trading voyage, and the rhythm of the kitchen was all that kept her mind from wandering to the endless possibilities of the sea. She glanced at the pile of spices drying in the shade, cinnamon and cloves from the last shipment, their rich aroma mingling with the sweet coconut oil that she used to grease her hands. These spices were more than just trade goods. They were threads connecting her world to distant lands, to the bustling Indian bazaars and the grand Arabian bazaars. Her fingers traced the patterns etched into the worn wooden counter, each line whispering tales of past haggles and deals struck. Every morning, when the sun painted the sky in hues of coral, she would rise before the rest of the house stirred, tend to her small garden, water the herbs and vegetables, and then begin the slow, rhythmic work of kneading bread. This was her domain, the small courtyard nestled in the heart of their home, where the walls whispered stories of her ancestors. Her mother, who had been a renowned spice seller in her own right, had taught her the secrets of this world. How to tell the quality of a clove by its deep red hue, the precise blend of pepper and turmeric that gave their curry its vibrant color. Her world was one of careful balance, of weighing not just spices and coins, but words and trust. She knew that behind every smile in the market there might lurk a shrewd bargain hunter, and every friendly face might hide a potential cheat. Yet, despite the challenges, Fatma found solace in the familiar routine. She knew that while the ocean might be wild and unpredictable, it was also a source of life, bringing not just hardship, but also fortune to their doorstep. She trusted her husband's instincts. She had seen him navigate the treacherous waters off the coast of East Africa and strike deals that left rivals envious. As the dough came together under her skilled hands, she thought of him charting their course across the vast Indian Ocean, and she prayed that the currents would favor him, guiding him back to her and their children safely. The hours passed as Fatma worked, each movement precise and economical. The dough rested, she sorted dried chilies, their heat a stark contrast to the gentle motion of her hands. Each morning she woke before sunrise, and each evening she closed her work after sunset, her prayers mingling with the scent of cardamom and nutmeg. In this small courtyard, she wove a life of quiet strength, patiently waiting for the day her husband would return, bringing with him tales of distant lands and the promise of a shared fortune. She was a Swahili woman of Zanzibar, her world measured by the rising and setting of the sun. the changing seasons and the ebb and flow of the tides. Her world was shaped by the same forces that guided the ships of her husband across the vast ocean to faraway shores. The Swahili along the East African coast had a unique way of passing time. Unlike those who followed the path of the moon, they relied on the stars. Their days were marked by the fixed stars that held their gaze. Even as the sun moved across the heavens, in the evenings, when the sky blazed with celestial light, they would gather in open spaces, a community united beneath the vast canvas of night. The elders, with their deep understanding of the cosmos, would point out constellations, each twinkling point of light telling a story of adventure, warning, or prophecy. The men, with their keen eyes, trained to spot distant horizons, would scan the night sky for the Southern Cross, a guiding beacon in their seafaring lives. The women, as they sat weaving or grinding grain, would hum songs that echoed the rhythms of the stars, creating a harmonious blend of earthly tasks and celestial wonders. Children were raised on tales of celestial heroes and mythical beasts, their imaginations ignited by stories that unfolded among the stars. Time was measured not just in hours and minutes, but in star positions. A celestial clock that dictated fishing seasons, planting cycles, and the rhythms of life. When it was time to set sail, the captain would consult the stars, aligning their journey with the celestial guidance, trusting in the wisdom of the cosmos to guide them across the waves. Their world, much like the night sky, was full of mysteries, adventures, and the promise of new horizons. As the generations passed, the Swahili kept their traditions alive. Each evening, under the watchful gaze of the stars, they reaffirmed their connection to the ancient wisdom that had guided their ancestors for centuries. For the Swahili along the East African coast, life was a journey as unpredictable as the sea and as eternal as the stars. They navigated both with equal parts courage, curiosity, and unwavering resilience. In the heart of the Indian Ocean during the early 1800s, a network of winds known as the monsoons not only carried merchants and their precious cargo, but also empires across the seven seas. Among these sailing conquerors was a sultan, whose legend echoes across the Swahili coast. Sultan said of Oman. Born in the bustling city of Muscat on the Arabian Peninsula in 1794, Said bin Sultan was not your typical prince. Growing up amidst the labyrinthine halls of the Omani royal court, he was a keen observer of the intricate game of power, while other princes honed their sword skills or indulged in poetry. Said preferred to lurk in the shadows, listening intently to whispered plots and hidden loyalties. You see, power in Oman was as elusive as the desert wind. Alliances shifted like sand dunes, and even brothers could turn against each other for a single moment's advantage. His father, Sultan Tior, faced constant threats from rivals both within and outside the family, and Said witnessed firsthand the machinations of those who sought to claim the throne. His mother, Anisa bint Salim, was a member of a powerful clan in Muscat, but she died when Said was still young. His father, Sultan Tahir, struggled to keep control over Oman, facing opposition from various factions, including some of his own relatives. Despite this instability, Said received a traditional Islamic education, mastering the Quran and Hadith. However, his real education began when he entered his father's court. There, he learned the art of statecraft, negotiation, and most importantly, survival. He saw how his older brother, Jalil, was chosen to succeed their father. Then he watched as Jalil, once the heir apparent, was abruptly banished from the kingdom, stripped of his title, and sent into exile. This drastic turn of events left Said shaken and reflective. It was then that he realized blindly following tradition or birthright was no guarantee for success. Instead, if he wished to rule, he must carve out his path. In 1804, when Said was barely 10 years old, his father, Sultan Tahir, passed away, leaving the Omani Empire without a clear successor. What followed was a period of chaos and struggle for power. Said's brother Jalal, who had been exiled, returned to make a claim on the throne. Muscat was divided into two camps, each supporting a different contender. Amidst this turmoil, Said found himself caught in a web of intrigue and danger. Recognizing the precarious situation, Said fled to the safety of the Trucial States, a loose federation of sheikdoms along the Persian Gulf coast. There he lived under the protection of his uncle, Sheikh Khalifa bin Hamad of Dubai, who recognized the young man's intelligence and resilience. During his time in exile, Said spent countless hours studying maps, poring over accounts of faraway lands, and learning about global trade routes. His mind was sharp, his spirit unbroken. Meanwhile, back in Muscat, the struggle for power continued. But neither Jalal nor any of their other contenders could truly unite the empire. Each had their own ambitions and loyalties. By 1806, it was clear to many that Oman needed a strong leader who could restore order and stability. And many began to think of Syed, the young prince who had shown remarkable maturity and wisdom beyond his years. With the support of his uncle, Sheikh Khalifa, Said began his journey back to Muscat, not as a defeated exile, but as a determined conqueror. In 1807, he re-entered Muscat at the head of a small but fierce force. His opponents underestimated him, dismissing him as just a young prince. But Said had learned from his past mistakes. He was cautious, strategic, and utterly relentless. After a series of intense battles, Said emerged victorious. His rivals were either defeated or forced to flee. And thus, at the age of 13, Said bin Sultan found himself on the throne of the Omani Empire. His reign marked the beginning of a new chapter in Omani history. But Said's ambition did not end with restoring order in Muscat. As he looked out over his empire, he saw challenges and opportunities that previous rulers had ignored. One of his first acts as the young sultan was to address the issue of piracy. For years, unruly elements had used the Omani coastline as a base to harass shipping vessels passing through the Strait of Hormuz, a vital passage for trade. To quell this menace, Said negotiated a treaty with the British, who had their own naval presence in the region. This treaty brought a semblance of peace to the waters, allowing trade to flow more freely once again. With piracy under control, Said turned his attention to the heart of his empire. He reorganized the administration, introduced accounting reforms, and appointed loyal officials to key positions. This restructuring brought efficiency and stability to the government, which in turn fostered economic growth. Trade flourished under his reign, and the coffers of the empire began to fill. But Said's greatest legacy lies in his vision for expansion, particularly his focus on the Swahili coast of East Africa. He saw the potential of this region, rich in resources and strategically located along major trade routes. In 1824, in a bold move that few rulers would have contemplated, Said decided to relocate his capital from Muscat to Zanzibar, a small island off the coast of East Africa. This shift was not just symbolic, it represented a fundamental change in Oman's political and economic orientation. Said was not the first ruler to recognize the strategic value of the Swahili coast. For centuries, Arab traders had ventured into this region, drawn by the wealth generated by the monsoon winds and the bustling trade in gold, ivory, and later, cloves. But Said's approach was different. He wasn't just interested in trade, he wanted to rule. The coastal city-states of East Africa had long enjoyed a degree of autonomy. They thrived due to their control over the lucrative trade in African goods and the wealth of the interior. But they had never before faced a ruler who sought to impose the authority of an empire. When Said arrived in Zanzibar with his fleet, it was a display of power that the local leaders could not ignore. Zanzibar, with its deep water harbor, luxurious palaces constructed from the coral of the Indian Ocean, and its sprawling plantations, had been a hub of trade for centuries. Now it was about to become the seat of an empire. It wasn't just military might that made Said's arrival significant. He brought with him a vision of a united and prosperous future for the region. He envisioned a grand trading empire, one that would stretch from the Arabian Peninsula to the heart of Africa. And it all started right here in Zanzibar. As the Omani Empire expanded its influence along the Swahili coast, Said laid the foundation for a new era. His capital was now firmly established in Zanzibar, and the winds of change were sweeping across the region. But Said's legacy is not just about conquest and control. It's also about the cultural fusion that occurred as a result of the Omani presence. They brought with them Arabic language, customs, and religion, which blended with the existing Swahili culture, creating a unique and vibrant society. Though the empire was vast, ruling over such diverse lands presented immense challenges. Communication was difficult, and the logistics of maintaining control over distant territories were complex. And so Said employed a strategy of indirect rule, working through local leaders and institutions whenever possible. This allowed him to govern a diverse range of people with varying customs and traditions without having to impose a single monolithic rule. It was a practical necessity, but it also proved to be a successful means of governance. The people of the Swahili coast, already accustomed to a degree of self-rule, appreciated the continuity of local leadership. And the introduction of Omani administrators brought new systems of law and revenue collection that helped stabilize the region. However, Said's empire did not exist in a vacuum. It was shaped by external forces, both opportunities and threats that came from the wider world. The decline of the Ottoman Empire created a power vacuum in the region, allowing European powers to assert their dominance. And the Omani Empire found itself caught in this struggle, though Said tried to maintain a balance between the various European powers. Playing them against each other to his advantage, the odds were stacked against him. The superior technology and aggressive expansionism of the Europeans eventually overwhelmed his empire. Despite these external pressures, Said's reign was a remarkable achievement for a man who had taken the throne at the age of 13 and had reshaped not just one but two regions of the world. His story is a testament to the power of vision, strategy, and adaptability in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges. And as the sun sets over the Indian Ocean, his legacy continues to echo across the shores of Oman and Zanzibar, reminding us that even in the darkest of times, one man's ambition can light up the world. And that's all for today. Once his capital had shifted to Zanzibar, Sultan Said's dream began to take shape in earnest. The island was not just a new home, it was the anchor of a maritime empire. From this small stretch of coral and sand, he reached into the interior of Africa, deep into trade routes that had long been controlled by Swahili merchant families. He forged alliances with local chiefs and caravan leaders who brought ivory, gold, and enslaved people from the Great Lakes region. These caravans stretched for weeks, winding through forests and savannas, carrying tusks longer than a man's height and bundles of precious goods. Zanzibar became their final destination, where markets bustled under the heavy sun. Capcut Prompt, a Swahili caravan of porters carrying ivory tusks and bundles of cloth through East African savanna. led by traders in Kansas and turbans, but Sultan Siad said was not content with trade alone. He cast his gaze further across the seas. He signed treaties with the British, securing protection for his shipping lanes, while also yielding to their pressure on restricting the slave trade. Though in practice, the trade continued in shadows and loopholes. With India, he strengthened commercial links that tied Zanzibar to the vast networks of Bombay merchants. The Sultan's vision demanded control, and control demanded force. His soldiers patrolled the streets of Zanzibar, ensuring order in the marketplaces. Rebellions along the coast were swiftly crushed, with cannons fired from dhows against rebellious settlements. Power, after all, was not only built through diplomacy, but also maintained through fear. Cap-cut prompt, Omani soldiers in red turbans and white robes marching through Zanzibar's narrow stone streets, watched cautiously by Swahili townsfolk. Yet, despite the harshness, Seedsed was admired by many for his charisma. He held lavish audiences in his palaces, where Indian merchants, Arab nobles, and Swahili elders gathered in chambers perfumed with incense. Here, he mediated disputes, waged trade proposals, and reinforced his image as both sultan and father figure. As his biographer Gerald Ben Jabra describes, Said said enjoyed nothing more than receiving embassies and concluding treaties. And in his private life, he was said to be a lover of poetry and the arts. He commissioned works of Islamic calligraphy and collected rare birds for his menagerie, fascinated by the diversity of the natural world. His court, in fact, became a melting pot of cultures, attracting scholars and thinkers from across his domains. They debated philosophies, traded knowledge, and contributed to the intellectual ferment that made Zanzibar a center of learning. Despite the grandeur, the cracks were widening. Clove plantations expanded across the island, worked by enslaved laborers under relentless heat. Wealth flowed into the Sultan's coffers, but it came at the cost of suffering on the fields. His power, though dazzling, was built on fragile foundations. Foundations that would be tested after his death. Cap-cut prompt, a clove plantation in Zanzibar, with rows of trees, enslaved African laborers working under the sun, and overseers in turbans watching horseback. Seedsed died in 1856, leaving behind a legacy that was both monumental and deeply problematic. Under his rule, Zanzibar had transformed into a hub of trade and cultural exchange, a testament to his grand vision of an interconnected world. Yet, the prosperity of his realm was built on the exploitation of countless lives. Enslaved Africans toiled under the lash, their sweat and suffering fueling the very riches that adorned the Sultan's palaces. The seeds of discontent sown during his reign would soon sprout into open rebellion, challenging the foundations of his successor's power. As we delve deeper into this tumultuous history, we must confront the complexities of Seedsed's legacy. He was a leader who straddled two worlds, embracing both tradition and change, ruthlessness and charm. To truly understand the rise and fall of his empire, we must explore the depths of his contradictions, the brilliance and the brutality that defined his rule. In the heart of Zanzibar city, nestled amidst the bustling crowds and vibrant bazaars, lies the old fort, a silent sentinel guarding secrets of a bygone era. Built in the 17th century by the Portuguese, this imposing structure stands as a tangible link to Zanzibar's rich and often turbulent past. Its thick stone walls have witnessed centuries of change. From the days when the Portuguese held sway over the island to the Omani conquest that ushered in a new chapter in Zanzibar's history. As we step inside its protective embrace, we are transported to a different time. The cool shade of the fort offers a respite from the tropical heat. allowing us to wander through its vast courtyard and marvel at the architectural heritage that surrounds us. The weathered stones seem to whisper tales of a glorious past, inviting us to imagine the events that unfolded within these ancient boundaries. But the old fort is more than just a repository of historical echoes. It has played an integral role in shaping Zanzibar's identity. During the Omani period, the fort was strategically fortified, evolving into a symbol of power and defense. The Sultan's palace, once located here, served as the seat of authority, reflecting the zenith of Omani influence in East Africa. Today, the ruins of the palace lie beneath the bustling market that occupies the fort's grounds. And as we explore these remnants, we are reminded of the ebb and flow of empires. The spirit of entrepreneurship, however, endures. The fort has been adapted to the needs of modern times, housing a vibrant market that showcases the best of Zanzibar's craftsmanship and commerce. Strolling through the labyrinthine stalls, we encounter skilled artisans displaying their wares, from intricate wood carvings to vibrant textiles. The air is filled with the aroma of spices, a tribute to Zanzibar's historical role as a key player in the spice trade. The old fort stands as a testament to Zanzibar's enduring spirit. It has seamlessly transitioned from a fortress to a marketplace, embodying the essence of a city that has embraced change while cherishing its heritage. As the sun sets over Zanzibar, casting long shadows across the fort, we are left to ponder the weight of history that surrounds us. The old fort is not merely a landmark, but a living, breathing entity that continues to shape the cultural landscape of Zanzibar. The death of Said bin Sultan in 1856 marked a turning point in Zanzibar's history, setting in motion a series of events that would test the limits of human endurance and challenge the very foundations of the Omani Empire. His successor, Major General Abdullah an-Nasir, known as Sultan Majid, inherited a realm teetering on the edge of chaos. The fragile balance that his father had so painstakingly crafted began to unravel, plunging Zanzibar into a maelstrom of violence and despair. As the new sultan ascended to the throne, he was confronted with the daunting task of suppressing the escalating slave rebellion in mainland Tanzania. Thousands of enslaved Africans, fueled by years of oppression and injustice, rose up against their Omani masters. The ensuing conflict became a crucible of resistance and brutality, forever etching itself into the annals of African history. Amidst this turmoil, Sultan Majid made a fateful decision that would have profound consequences for generations to come. In an effort to quell the unrest and curry favor with the British, he agreed to the complete abolition of slavery within his empire. This monumental decree, while celebrated as a victory for human rights, unleashed a Pandora's box of unforeseen challenges. With the sudden emancipation of hundreds of thousands of enslaved people, Zanzibar found itself grappling with the social, economic, and political ramifications of a slave-free society. The ruling elite, accustomed to the subjugation of others, struggled to adapt to this radical shift. At the same time, the newly freed individuals yearned for autonomy and recognition, demanding a place in a society that had long denied them basic rights. This abrupt transformation laid bare the fault lines that ran through Omani society, exposing deep-rooted inequalities and simmering tensions. The seeds of discontent sown during Said bin Sultan's reign, such as the expansion of clove plantations and the use of forced labor, bore bitter fruit. Discontent festered, threatening to engulf Zanzibar in a maelstrom of instability. And as the winds of change swept across the island, a new generation of leaders emerged, ready to challenge the status quo and reshape the course of Zanzibar's destiny. Amidst the ashes of empire, a new narrative was about to unfold, one that would redefine freedom, justice, and a struggle for equality in an era of profound upheaval. As Sultan Said's rule stretched into its later decades, the rhythms of his empire grew familiar. The clove plantations thrived, and Zanzibar's docks brimmed with dhows arriving from Arabia, India, and even as far as Europe. His island had become the crossroad of the Indian Ocean. Yet, power carries a weight. The Sultan's health began to falter under the burden of decades of governance. He traveled less often, spending more time within the shaded courts of his palaces. Even so, his mind never rested. He still dreamed of expansion, of alliances, of securing his dynasty's future. As Sultan Said approached his twilight years, the political winds of East Africa shifted dramatically. European powers, driven by the Industrial Revolution and a thirst for empire, started casting covetous glances at Zanzibar. For the Europeans, particularly the British and the French, Zanzibar represented a strategic jewel. Its location astride the Indian Ocean trade routes made it pivotal for their expanding interests in Africa. And so they began to weave subtle webs of diplomacy and influence around the Sultanate, aiming to harness its strategic importance for their own gain. Faced with these external pressures, Sultan Said found himself in a precarious position. While his empire was at its zenith, he understood the value of Zanzibar and wouldn't relinquish its importance without a struggle. So began a delicate game of chess between the Sultan and the Europeans. Treaties were signed, alliances were forged, and behind closed doors, intricate negotiations took place. Sultan Said, wise and cautious, maneuvered skillfully, agreeing to treaties that promised friendship and trade, while subtly resisting any attempts by the Europeans to erode his sovereignty. But time, as it always does, marched relentlessly forward, and in 1856, Sultan Said boarded a dhow and set sail from Muscat to Zanzibar. It was a journey he had undertaken countless times before, yet this voyage would be his last. As the ship cut through the azure waters of the Indian Ocean, the Sultan fell ill. Far from the familiar shores, surrounded by his attendants on the vast expanse of the sea, Sultan Said breathed his last. The very ocean that had been the conduit of his rise to power and empire was now carrying him to his eternal rest. News of the Sultan's demise sent ripples of shock and intrigue across his far-flung domains. The journey back to Muscat, his birthplace, began, and with it, preparations for one of the grandest funerals the region had ever seen. Upon his return to Muscat, the capital he had left many years before, his body was received with full imperial honors, a testament to the respect and reverence he commanded even in death. The streets were adorned, the cannons boomed, and a procession unlike any other wound its way through the city. The Sultan, who had bridged 2 continents and reshaped the course of East African history, was being taken to his final resting place. The Sultan's passing left a void in the empire he had so painstakingly built. His sons, upon inheriting the vast realm, chose to divide it, with one taking control in Muscat and the other in Zanzibar. While this division may have seemed like a practical solution at the time, it sowed the seeds of future conflicts and, most importantly, left Zanzibar vulnerable to the encroaching colonial powers. In the years following Sultan Said's death, European influence in Zanzibar intensified. The strategic importance of the island, coupled with the internal power struggles, made it a ripe target for colonial ambitions. The British, ever watchful, saw an opportunity to expand their empire and subtly began to tighten their grip on the island's affairs. Trade agreements were made, treaties were signed, and slowly but surely, Zanzibar found itself on a trajectory it couldn't fully control. Sultan Syed said's dream of an expansive maritime empire bridging Arabia and Africa was a vision that had captured the hearts and minds of many. His story is one of ambition, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of unity in a fragmented world. But as his descendants struggled to hold on to his legacy, the wheels of colonialism began to turn, threatening to grind that very legacy into dust. Picture, if you will, the bustling port of Zanzibar during the height of the clove trade. The air is thick with the aroma of spices and the sounds of merchants haggling in a multitude of languages. At the center of this vibrant hub is the Sultan's Palace, a majestic structure that symbolizes the vast reach of the empire. Within its cool halls sits the Sultan, a shrewd and ambitious ruler who has inherited a realm that stretches from the Arabian Peninsula to the shores of East Africa. His empire, however, is not without its challenges. Rivalries simmer, resources are strained, and the whispers of colonialism echo on the horizon. Yet the Sultan is undeterred. Inspired by the legacy of his grandfather, he embarks on a series of daring missions to forge alliances, secure trade routes, and expand his domain. He sends emissaries to distant lands, seeking not only exotic goods and rare knowledge, but also strategic partnerships that will bolster his empire's defenses against the encroaching Europeans. Along the way, he commissions great works of architecture, builds bustling cities, and institutes legal and educational reforms that will stand the test of time. But as the Sultan's power grows, so too does the envy and greed of his rivals. Conspiracies are hatched, rebellions flare up, and the Sultan finds himself at the center of a maelstrom of conflict. Despite the odds, he fights back, employing cunning tactics and assembling a formidable navy to protect his realm. As the story unfolds, the Sultan's empire is pushed to its limits. Can he hold on to his ancestral lands and secure his place in history, or will his empire crumble under the weight of its own ambition? Remember the magnificent dhow, a symbol of the Sultan's far-reaching empire, navigating the vast expanse of the Indian Ocean. Well, those majestic vessels played a pivotal role in shaping the Sultan's fortunes and connecting vibrant cultures of Arabia and Africa. Now, I invite you to embark on a journey of discovery with us, as we explore the secrets of these remarkable ships. Picture yourself standing on the bustling docks of Zanzibar, the warm ocean breeze caressing your skin as you witness the arrival of a fleet of dhows. Each vessel is a masterpiece of design, boasting triangular sails that catch the wind and propel them forward with grace. The hulls, adorned with intricate patterns, tell tales of distant lands and exotic adventures. As the dhows unload their precious cargo, you can't help but marvel at the sheer variety of goods they bring. From the aromatic spices of India to the shimmering gold of Arabia, the treasures carried by these ships symbolize the vast network of trade that the Sultan has established. But the story of the dhow doesn't end there. These vessels weren't just tools of trade, they were cultural ambassadors, carrying not only goods, but also ideas, customs, and traditions. Imagine the lively banter on board as merchants from different lands share stories of their cultures, fostering connections that bridge the divides of distance and custom. And as you watch the dhows set sail once again, you realize that their importance goes beyond mere trade. They are a testament to human ingenuity, a symbol of the Sultan's far-reaching empire, and a reminder of the interconnectedness of the world. Let us turn our thoughts to the enduring legacy of Sultan Syed, said, a man who dared to dream of uniting continents and bridging cultures. His story serves as a beacon of inspiration, reminding us that with ambition, determination, and a touch of audacious spirit, we too can navigate the choppy seas of adversity and reach our own personal shores. So, as we gather around this crackling fire, let us share our own dreams, aspirations, and the challenges we face in pursuing them. Let us be the sultans of our own destinies, steering our lives towards the horizons of our potential. Together, let us keep the flame of his legacy alive, ensuring that the story of Sultan Said Said continues to inspire generations to come. When people speak of Zanzibar's spice wealth, their voices often drift to the clove. That small, fragrant bud with power enough to shape the fate of islands. But cloves were not born on the Swahili coast. Their journey began far away in the lush volcanic soils of the Maluku Islands, in today's Indonesia. For centuries, cloves were guarded there as treasure. To even remove seedlings was a crime. Yet, by the early 19th century, the guarded monopoly was broken. It was Sultan Syed Said who brought cloves to East Africa, carrying seedlings across the ocean. Pemba Island, just north of Zanzibar, revealed itself as an ideal home. Its red soils and constant rains welcomed the trees as though they had always belonged. Within years, Pemba was transformed. Fields once meant for cassava and millet became neat rows of clove plantations, their blossoms carrying a perfume that drifted on the wind. We don't know exactly when cloves arrived on Pemba Island, but stories tell us it happened soon after Said took the throne. That would be sometime around 1834. By the 1840s, cloves were growing along the shores and blanketing the hillsides of Pemba, turning the island into what one traveler called a paradise of delicious fragrance. Sometime around the same period, Said died and his son, Sultan Hamoud bin Said, moved the capital to Zanzibar City. This left Pemba under the rule of a local governor, and here's where our story takes a turn towards darkness. You see, the Sultanate was built on trade and tribute, and its prosperity depended on extracting wealth from its lands and people. The clove plantations became a big part of that extraction. On the one hand, cloves were a cash crop that brought in money. On the other hand, they required a lot of labor to plant, prune, and pick. Now, according to some accounts, enslaved people were already present in Pemba before cloves came, because slavery was a well-established practice in the region. However, with the introduction of cloves, the demand for labor skyrocketed. It is estimated that the clove plantations on Pemba alone needed about 20,000 enslaved people to work them. So where did these people come from? Well, there are stories about groups of enslaved people being brought in directly from places like Madagascar and Mozambique. We're talking about people captured in wars or from those unlucky enough to have been sold into captivity. Some accounts even say that Arab traders passing by on their way to India and Asia would drop anchor off the coast of Pemba and sell captives they picked up on their travels. In fact, there is this one tale about a ship carrying Omani Arabs who got caught in a storm near Pemba Island. When they washed ashore, the survivors were taken in by the local people, but soon enough, most of them were sold into slavery. This mix of different ethnicities among the enslaved population would eventually contribute to the unique mix of cultures that you find in Pemba today. But, at the time, it meant a lot of suffering. You see, the lives of the enslaved people on Pemba were tough. They lived in small villages close to the plantations where they had to work long hours, 6 days a week. There wasn't much rest for them. Even on Fridays, they were allowed to sleep in late after the Muslim prayer, but then they had to work extra hard to make up for it on Saturdays. And let's talk about the conditions they worked in. The clove plantations were like their own little towns. They had managers, houses, warehouses for storing the spices, and even places for the slaves to stay. These places weren't exactly comfortable. They were made of coral stones and wood, and the roofs leaked during the rainy season. Plus, there were all sorts of rules that the enslaved people had to follow, like they weren't allowed to leave the plantation without permission. And if they broke a rule, they got punished. Sometimes it was just a beating, but sometimes they took it a step further and put chains on the offender's legs. But let's shift gears a bit and talk about something positive for a moment. Despite all this, life on the plantations wasn't just about hard work and punishment. Many enslaved people found ways to connect with each other and form tight-knit communities. They had social events and gatherings, and many of them were Muslim, so they prayed together and celebrated holidays like Eid. But let's face it, all of this happened under a dark cloud. You see, while some enslaved people managed to gain freedom for themselves, most of them were born into slavery and never knew any other life. Some sources say that the cost of buying someone's freedom was way too high, especially for the enslaved Africans. It would have taken years of work to earn enough money to buy their freedom, and many didn't get that chance. Others were uninterested in leaving the only life they knew, or maybe they had hoped that things would get better under the next leader. Speaking of leaders, by the end of the 1800s, Zanzibar's fortunes changed. The clove trade, which had been a source of wealth for generations, started to become less profitable. And this wasn't just because of global market changes. It was also due to some bad choices made by Zanzibar's leaders. They kept raising taxes and making new rules that made it harder for merchants to do business. In the meantime, the British, who had been watching all of this from the sidelines, decided to step in and help. Of course, they helped in their own interest. They used the excuse of protecting trade to start telling Zanzibar what to do. This turned out to be a big turning point because by the 1890s, Zanzibar became a British protectorate, meaning it was under the control of the British Empire. But here's the thing, while the British were focused on Zanzibar, they didn't pay much attention to what was happening on Pemba. So the people of Pemba were still stuck working on those plantations, picking cloves and dreaming of better days. Now, let's get back to the story. Fast forward to World War II. By this time, the island had a new owner, the Japanese Empire, but no one really cared about Pemba's problems. It wasn't until after the war that Tanzania gained independence from the British and the Japanese in 1963. But even after independence, the people of Pemba continued to struggle with unfair labor practices on the clove plantations. It wasn't until the government stepped in with land reforms in the 1960s that things started to change. They redistributed some of the plantation land to the people working on it. This gave thousands of families a chance to own a piece of their own land and grow crops like cloves, coconut, maize, and rice. It was a big deal. Since then, the clove industry on Pemba has gone through a lot of changes. At first, the Zanzibar government had a monopoly on clove exports, meaning they were the only ones who could legally sell cloves grown on the island. But in 1993, they started allowing private buyers, which opened up new opportunities for farmers. Today, the clove industry on Pemba is mostly run by small-scale farmers who grow and sell cloves on their own. It's a far cry from the days of big plantations and enslaved labor. But you know what? As you wander through the streets of Pemba town, you can still smell the cloves in the air. It's a reminder of the island's rich history and the hard work of generations past. After the Zanzibar Revolution of 1972, clove production dropped. But in the 1980s, the government tried to revive the industry by giving out free seedlings to farmers and encouraging them to grow more cloves. Today, Pemba is once again known for its high-quality cloves, and farmers are earning more money than ever before. That said, challenges remain. For example, diseases sometimes destroy entire crops, and there are worries about whether Pemba's soil can keep producing quality cloves for much longer. By the mid-19th century, Pemba had become the beating heart of the clove trade. Ships crowded its harbors, their sails like white wings against the turquoise sea. The fragrance of cloves drifted so heavily across the waters that travelers said they could smell the island before they could see it. Wealth poured into Zanzibar and Pemba, and Sultan Syed Said's gamble paid off. The Swahili coast became a fragrant empire. Merchants built coral stone mansions with latticed windows and carved wooden doors. Poets wrote verses about the spice winds, weaving love and longing into their lines. Markets overflowed with imported silks, glass beads, and Chinese porcelain, all purchased with the profits of cloves. For a brief time, it seemed as though Pemba could claim the title of paradise, its people lifted by the golden tide of trade. A wealthy Swahili merchant in a flowing kanzu robe and embroidered cap, standing proudly in front of a carved Zanzibar door, dhow sails behind him in the harbor. But paradise often hides a shadow. The clove boom relied not only on fertile soil, but on relentless human labor. Thousands of enslaved Africans, brought from the mainland, toiled in silence beneath the trees. Their hands plucked the fragrant buds. Their backs bore the weight of sacks. Their sweat fed the wealth of others. For every coral stone palace, there were countless mud huts of those who labored unseen. Travelers described the stark contrasts. Along the coast, music and laughter filled the nights as dhows brought dancers and poets together. Inland, the sounds were different. The rustle of clove leaves underfoot, the cries of children in labor camps, the endless rhythm of toil. Pemba was at once beautiful and tragic, a land perfumed by blossoms but haunted by suffering. A group of enslaved workers carrying baskets of cloves through plantation fields, guarded by overseers, contrasted with a distant coral stone mansion on a hill. And yet, cloves had their own quiet magic. The trees demanded patience. 7 long years before their first harvest, families prayed for survival through those years, knowing that once the harvests began, fortunes could be made or lost with the monsoon winds. Storms could wipe out entire seasons. A single spark of disease could spread through plantations like wildfire. To plant cloves was to plant hope, but also to gamble with fate. This gamble made Pemba restless. Wealthy planters schemed against one another. Merchants fought over markets. Even whispers of sabotage spread, that rivals poisoned trees or bribed sailors to spoil cargoes. The island's fragrance, sweet as it was, carried undertones of rivalry and fear. A dramatic coastal storm with dhows battling high waves, lightning flashing over clove fields near the shore, symbolizing both danger and beauty. As the 19th century wore on, the winds of change began to stir around Pemba. The clove trade, once a source of untold riches, started to falter. The Zanzibar Sultanate, for a time, became a fading memory of what it had been. When the wind carried their fragrance across the sea, sailors called it a blessing, a sign of safe landfall and prosperous trade. So let us follow the scent now and see how the people of Pemba wove the fragrance of cloves into every aspect of their lives. On a bright morning on Pemba, shoppers crowd the bustling market. Colourful piles of spices and produce laid out on mats beneath the shade of great clove trees. Amidst the lively chatter, 2 young men approach, one adorned with a white kanzu or long robe and a red cap perched atop his head. His companion sports a flowing green kanga, a large, colourful cloth wrapped around his waist. Their eyes meet, smiles exchange, and they begin to dance around each other. And then, suddenly, wait, are they arguing? One gestures toward a pile of cloves and shakes his head disapprovingly. Ah, he wants something stronger, perhaps more cardamom or cinnamon. The seller listens patiently, his hands working deftly to weigh out the spices. Finally, he nods, pleased with the selection. Now comes the test. Will the aromas blend harmoniously? The seller, with a flourish, mixes the spices together. The buyers close their eyes, inhaling deeply. Yes, this will work. And soon both men are laughing and slapping each other on the back, united by the magic of spice. In Swahili, the language of the coastal people, cloves are known as karafu, its soft consonants and open vowels mirroring the gentle caress of the sea breeze. In songs and poetry, the phrase "ache of a clove" described the pangs of longing for a lover absent. When the Swahili poet Hassan bin Mohammed composed his Elegies of Zanzibar, published in 1887, he drew a parallel between the pain of lost love and the lingering ache of consuming a clove. And when they are used as a symbol of love, they take on an even deeper meaning. Poets would often compare the clove's strong aroma to the enduring nature of true love, a love that persists and deepens over time, just like the fragrance of a clove that lingers in the air long after it's been crushed. To gift a clove was to whisper a promise, to carry a clove was to make a vow. Once the cloves began to be traded and brought in wealth, people started wearing garlands of cloves around their necks. It was a sign of prosperity and a way to always have the smell of cloves nearby. These fragrant necklaces doubled as a form of currency. So you can imagine the cloves becoming tokens of love too. You can picture a young man approaching his beloved, perhaps nervously adjusting his clove necklace, offering her a single bud as a token of his affection. She accepts it, and in that shared breath of clove fragrance, a silent promise is made. In Tarab music, a genre born from the fusion of African and Arabic musical traditions, the clove flower sometimes symbolized desire, its fleeting yet unforgettable presence echoing the ephemeral nature of love. Musicians would sing of how the fragrance would come and go, just as the feeling of being in love could be all-consuming one moment and vanished the next. This is why they would sing about the clove, because it represented those feelings. One hot afternoon, two lovers meet beneath a swaying coconut palm. He offers her a clove bud, and she takes it, pressing it gently between her fingers. As the sun dips below the horizon, they share a quiet kiss, and in that moment, the scent of cloves envelops them, carrying their love story on its wings. And that's what cloves came to represent for the people of Pemba. For centuries, they had been a simple spice, a way to add flavor to food. But now, they were something more. They were part of their culture, their daily life. They were a way to express love, longing, even loss. Let me tell you another story about cloves on Pemba. It's about a woman named Fatuma, who was renowned throughout the village for her skill in making traditional medicines. Her knowledge was a legacy passed down through generations, a deep understanding of the natural world and its healing properties. She was known for using cloves for everything from helping with a stomachache to warding off evil spirits. One day, a young mother came to Fatima, seeking help. Her child had been ill for days, and no medicine seemed to work. Fatima listened patiently, her gaze kind and understanding. She examined the child, her touch gentle and reassuring. Then she reached for a small bundle of cloves, tied with a frayed piece of cloth. Carefully, she ground the cloves into a fine powder, using a traditional stone mortar and pestle. The rich aroma filled the air, a mixture of sweet and spicy. With the powder ready, she mixed it with a spoonful of honey, ensuring the proportions were just right. Then she gave the child a small amount, hoping it would bring relief. As the days passed, the child slowly got better. The fever broke, Their appetite returned, and their laughter echoed once more within the home. The mother couldn't thank Fatima enough. She understood that while the honey helped soothe the child's throat, it was the cloves that held the real power. Cloves, which had been used for centuries to protect against evil spirits, had also saved her child. That's how powerful cloves were on Pemba Island. Not just a spice, but a way of life. Each bud held a universe of stories. Each leaf a whisper of tradition. If you want to hear more of these stories, please subscribe to the channel. The best way to do it is on our app, which is free to download and full of amazing content. While the spice trade brought riches to Pemba, it also led to a darker side, piracy. And if you want to learn more about the brave sailors who battled these pirates, you can watch our special episode by clicking here. We hope you'll join us there. The Zanzibar archipelago consists of two main islands, Unguja, which most people call Zanzibar, and Pemba, a smaller, lusher island lying about 50 kilometers north of Zanzibar. Pemba was known as the Island of the Cloves. The Swahili elite lived where the ocean kissed the land. Their palaces rose from coral stone, carved from the very reefs that lined the coast. These walls were cool to the touch, latticed with wooden beams of imported ticked inside. Shaded courtyards opened into quiet pools, where doves cooed and jasmine climbed the walls. To step into such a space was to leave behind the heat of the sun and enter a world of whispers, poetry, and measured steps. This is a story from Africa. It's 1498, and you are watching this channel. The Swahili city of Zanzibar is a jewel on the eastern shore of Africa. Its harbour thrums with the comings and goings of dhows laden with spices, ivory, and men. Here, the Indian Ocean laps against the shore, bearing the ghosts of monsoon winds that have travelled from India and China. It is here where two worlds meet and intertwine in a vibrant dance. The old caravan routes from the interior of Africa lead to this point, and now the sea routes from Asia also end here. This makes Zanzibar a place of commerce, yes, but more importantly, a place of exchange, of ideas, of art and culture. On a clear day, the Sultan of Zanzibar can see ships arriving from across the ocean. He can see them because his palace is perched right on the edge of the water, its roofline skimming the surface of the Indian Ocean. To build a house by the sea is risky. Most people know this. Not the Swahili for them. Risk is a game they play well, for it is from the sea that their fortunes come. Salt-laced winds carry the scent of faraway lands, the taste of adventures yet to be had. Life within these palaces moved slowly but with rhythm. In the mornings, scribes read aloud letters from Oman or Gujarat, carrying news of ships, alliances, and trade. Women prepared the day's perfumes, mixing rose water, cloves, and ambergris to scent garments and halls. Children played in the courtyards, their laughter echoing against stone. And always, from the balconies, the sea was visible. A constant reminder that wealth and danger both came from beyond the horizon. At noon, when the sun blazed its zenith, the palace fell quiet. Even the sea seemed to hold its breath during this time. Men reclined on divans, their voices low as they discussed business deals or the latest arrival from the Mogadishu. Palm-fanned shadows stretched and shifted on the coral walls, telling the time as patiently as the sun climbed higher. In the afternoons, the heat shimmered above the coral streets, distorting the familiar shapes of bazaars and mosques. Dhows, riding the waves like horses, would return from their ocean errands, bringing back tales of storms weathered and new lands discovered. Some days, poets would gather in the shade of the palace, their voices weaving stories of love and loss to the gentle strumming of a single-stringed instrument called a yatati. And as evening began its slow descent, the air grew sweet with the scent of grilled fish and coconut milk, wafting from kitchens where Swahili and Arabic met in a culinary embrace. The architecture itself spoke of power. Carved doors displayed Quranic verses in bold Arabic script. Floors were spread with Persian carpets brought across the ocean, their colors deep as the dusk. On the walls were intricate patterns, a silent testament to the skill of the builders. They depicted scenes from the legendary past, from the 7 cities of gold, or the story of the first king of the Mogadishu. Each curve and arch sang of a heritage reaching back to the dawn of Islam. But these weren't just decorative elements. They were a reflection of a society deeply rooted in faith and history. The sweeping arches were a clear nod to the grandeur of Islamic design, while the lattice windows allowed for glimpses of paradise without exposing what lay within. Intricate geometric patterns covering the walls and floors served as a constant reminder of divine order, of a world governed by laws both natural and spiritual. For the Swahili elite, their architecture wasn't just a shelter from the sun or the rain. It was a dialogue with their past, a testament to their faith, and a declaration of their cultural identity. Each pillar, each arch, each carved detail was a brushstroke in the grand canvas of their heritage. At night, lanterns of glass and brass reflected across polished coral walls, creating a dance of light that made even silence feel grand. Lanterns hung from carved wooden beams, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Incense, mixed with the tank of the sea breeze, carried on whispers of wind through open windows. The rhythmic crash of waves provided a soothing backdrop to the murmur of voices discussing the day's events or reciting verses of ancient poetry. On the polished coral floors, shadows flickered and swayed in the lantern light, turning the familiar into something magical. For, in the stillness of the night, the palace came alive with a different kind of energy. These were spaces designed not just for living, but for expression, for diplomacy, and for dreams. To understand what it was like to live in a coral palace, one must experience the coolness of the stone beneath bare feet, the gentle sway of a pomp-found courtyard, and the intoxicating scent of the ocean at twilight. But palaces were not only for leisure, they were stages for politics. When ambassadors arrived from the court of Kilwa or the Sultan of Oman, they were received with cannon fire and carpets laid before them. The finest silks and cottons were reserved for these important guests, who in turn presented the Sultan with gifts of ivory, pearls, or spices. Men would don their finest robes, some embroidered with gold thread, others with scenes from the epic poem of the Sindbad. In these moments, the reception hall would transform into a stage for diplomacy. As the sun dipped below the horizon, negotiations over trade or marriage alliances would stretch into the night, fueled by cardamom coffee and dates. Poets would recite verses, praising the host or weaving tales of distant lands. The language of Kiswahili flowed, sometimes laced with Arabic, sometimes peppered with phrases from India or China. The very walls seemed to listen intently, preserving the whispers of agreements and treaties that shaped the destiny of the Swahili world. These gatherings weren't just about politics or trade. They were a celebration of the Swahili ability to connect, to negotiate, and to thrive at the crossroads of civilizations. Every visitor who entered the palace took away a piece of this unique culture, a culture that thrived on the exchange of not just goods, but of ideas, stories, and dreams. And as the tide receded and the moon climbed higher, the ocean breeze carried the sound of laughter, the murmur of conversation, and the gentle strum of a single-stringed instrument. For in the heart of the Swahili palace, Life unfolded like a poem, each verse more beautiful than the last. These palaces became symbols of a civilization that stood at the crossroads of the world. They told visitors from Arabia, India, and even Portugal, here is a people refined, wealthy, and unbroken by the sea. The scent of cloves hung in the air, mingling with incense, as if the walls themselves breathed the rhythm of Swahili life. It is said that if you listen very carefully, you can still hear the echoes of their laughter, the murmur of their conversations, and the gentle strum of the single-stringed instrument. For, in the heart of the coral palaces of Zanzibar, life unfolded like a poem, each verse more beautiful than the last. When night fell over the coast, the palaces and courtyards of Zanzibar, Kilwa, and Mombasa did not sleep. Instead, they awakened with the sound of verse. Poetry, to the Swahili elite, was not entertainment alone. It was a weapon, a prayer, and a mirror of the heart. Men and women gathered in shaded courtyards or rooftop terraces, their voices rising softly against the hum of the sea. To listen or join in was a luxury few could afford. These were the salons of the Swahili coast, where wit was currency, and a good line could elevate a poet to renown. Here's how it went down. In the hushed twilight, after the day's heat had yielded to the evening calm, men and women, some veiled, others adorned in vibrant kangas, would gather. Often the women outshone the men with their quick, sharp verses that dripped with double meanings and innuendos. Yet it was not just about outdoing one another. It was about weaving words that danced on the edge of meaning, leaving the whole gathering nodding in appreciation, lost in thought, or chuckling knowingly. The Swahili language itself, a rich blend of Bantu, Arabic, and Persian, lent itself to this art form. Its flexibility allowed for subtle inflections, puns, and plays on words that kept listeners on the edge of their seats. It was a game of skill, a test of one's mastery over the language, and those who excelled were celebrated. A good verse, carefully crafted, was like a shield. It deflected insults, protected the vulnerable, and affirmed the strong. It was a way of speaking truth to power, of holding the mighty accountable. This was especially true when the poets turned their verses towards the rulers, sometimes praising them, sometimes gently chiding them, always reminding them that they too were subject to the whims of fate. But the salons were more than a stage for verbal sparring or a platform to praise the elite. They were schools, universities without degrees, libraries without books. Under the soft glow of oil lamp or the stars peeking through a moonless sky, the elders guided the young, unraveling the hidden meanings of verses, linking them to Quranic lessons or histories of the coast. It was here that identity was forged, the sense of being Swahili, of being both African and ocean-born, of belonging to a lineage tied to Arabia and yet rooted in the soil of the continent. These were also the sites where debates ignited. Questions of theology, law, and trade ethics were raised. Could a man be both a merchant and a saintly scholar? Was wealth proof of divine favor or a test of humility? These conversations, unhurried yet sharp, shaped the moral compass of the Swahili elite. They left no record on paper, but their echoes live in the verses still sung today. Beyond the realm of religion, these salons were bastions of knowledge. Astronomers would regale all with tales of the cosmos, their verses echoing the patterns of stars. And as the constellations shifted, so did the themes of the poetry. Love and loss found their voice under the same sky where merchants spun yarns of far-off lands and treasures untold. Listeners, young and old, would hang on every word, their minds expanding with each verse, their imaginations taking flight with every rhyme. And then there were the storytellers, the keepers of oral histories who wove tales of heroes and heroines, of kings and queens, of daring adventures on the high seas. Their voices, seasoned with age and experience, brought the past to life, making it feel as real as the sand beneath their feet. Through these stories, the youth learned of their heritage, of the struggles and triumphs that had shaped their communities. It was a way of preserving history, ensuring that the memories of their ancestors lived on in the hearts and minds of future generations. These gatherings were not merely social events. They were cultural cornerstones, shaping the intellectual, spiritual, and artistic landscape of the Swahili coast. Every verse, every tale, every debate contributed to a shared identity, binding the community together through the power of language and the magic of storytelling. But above it all, what truly made these salons special was the spirit of camaraderie that pervaded them. Social barriers seemed to melt away in the face of such artistry, leaving only an audience captivated by the human spirit's ability to create, to dream, and to inspire. There were no written records of what transpired within these hallowed spaces. The only evidence of their existence lay in the poems, songs, and stories passed down through generations, each carrying within it the essence of those unforgettable evenings spent in the company of words and music. They are gone now, those salons of the Swahili coast, but their legacy lives on, not just in the poetry that echoes across the ages, but in the very soul of the Swahili people. For within their culture, within their traditions, one can still hear the whispers of those unforgettable nights spent in the pursuit of excellence. The nights when the moon was a silent witness to the birth of ideas that would shape the world. Today, as the sun sets over the Indian Ocean, casting long shadows over the bustling streets of Dar es Salaam, Lamu, or Mombasa, one can almost hear the ghosts of poets past reciting their timeless verses, and in the rhythmic lull of the waves, one can almost make out the sound of laughter, applause, and the gentle strumming of a wood, all mingling together in a nostalgic symphony that celebrates the enduring spirit of the human voice. When business was concluded and poetry had been recited and debate had settled into quiet nods, then the elite of the Swahili coast turned to joy. Celebrations took place not only in the courtyard and the great halls of their houses, but also aboard the great dhows anchored in harbours like Zanzibar and Kilwa. These gatherings shimmered with music and dance and the intoxicating rhythm of the ocean. Food was at the heart of these evenings. Spiced rice, steamed with cloves, roasted fish, honeyed pastries, coconut milk served in cups carved from coconut shells. Servants moved among the guests, their steps balanced even on the rocking of the deck. The air filled with laughter and the pulse of drums that echoed against the water. But these were not frivolous affairs. They were acts of diplomacy. Alliances were sealed over shared meals, marriages arranged with whispered promises. Merchants from Arabia, India, and inland Africa were welcomed into the fold. The dhow itself became a stage, rocking gently as voices blended with the swell of the tide. This is a story about the Swahili people. It's about their cultural identity, and it is about how they forged it in the crucible of the Indian Ocean trade. To understand how this happened, we need to go back in time. The Swahili language has its roots in Bantu languages, brought to the coast by people who arrived in the area we now call Tanzania between the 6th and 10th centuries. At first, they lived simple lives as fishermen and farmers, growing crops like coconuts and bananas and cotton. Then came the Arab traders, and with them, Islam and a new way of doing things. Over time, the coastal communities adopted Islam. They began trading with the Arabs. And that's when things started to change. The arrival of the Arabs led to the creation of a new society, a blend of African and Arab cultures. It was this cultural fusion that gave rise to the Swahili language and identity. Now, because of the Swahili people's location along the East African coast, they were exposed to other cultures too, like those from Persia and India. Their interactions with these diverse groups enriched the Swahili culture, making it a melting pot of traditions. As trade flourished, so did the Swahili city-states. Kilwa, Kisiwani, and Zanzibar are prime examples. They became hubs of commerce and cultural exchange, attracting people from across the Indian Ocean. The wealth generated through trade allowed the Swahili people to build impressive structures like palaces and mosques. It was an era of artistic creativity. Stone masons crafted intricate designs on mosques and palaces, and poets composed epic poems celebrating life on the coast. During these golden years, the Swahili people developed a distinct style of architecture. Their buildings were constructed from coral stone, a limestone formed from the skeletons of countless tiny creatures that lived in the warm waters of the Indian Ocean. It's a testament to the Swahili's deep connection with the sea. The waves have been their constant companions since the beginning, and now they have become part of their very homes. Coral stone houses feature pointed arches and intricate windows that allow cool breezes to flow through. Many of these buildings, including the famous House of Wonders in Stone Town, bear the imprint of Arabic influence. However, there's a clear distinction. The Swahili did not simply copy what they saw. They adapted it, infusing their own style into every arch and window. In essence, they created something uniquely their own. This fusion of architectural styles is a reflection of the Swahili people's identity, shaped by their environment and enriched by their interactions with diverse cultures. But the Swahili identity is more than just their physical surroundings. It's deeply rooted in their experiences, values, and traditions, especially those related to the ocean. The Swahili have a profound connection to the sea. It's a bond forged over centuries of living on the coast and engaging in maritime trade. For them, the ocean is more than just a body of water. It's a source of livelihood, a highway to distant lands, and a vital part of their cultural heritage. Their deep-rooted connection with the ocean led to the creation of one of their most iconic symbols, the dhow. This traditional sailboat is more than just a vessel for transportation. It's a symbol of their identity, representing their skill as shipbuilders and their adventurous spirit. Dhows played a crucial role in connecting the Swahili people to the wider world. They facilitated trade, bringing in valuable goods and spreading the Swahili's influence across the Indian Ocean. Now let's imagine a typical evening during the Swahili dhow parties. You can picture yourself stepping onto a dhow as the sun begins its descent towards the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The gentle rocking of the boat as it bobs on the waves is your welcome. As you move further, the lively tunes of drums and the sweet melodies of traditional instruments fill your ears. Laughter echoes around you, mingling with the sound of the waves lapping against the hull of the dhow. Around you, men and women dressed in vibrant, colorful clothes sway to the rhythm. The rhythmic clapping of hands and the soft tinkling of anklets add to the enchanting atmosphere. The delicious aroma of grilled fish and spiced rice wafts through the air, mingling with the salty tang of the sea. The taste of coconut milk and honeyed pastries adds a sweet note to the feast. The night deepens, the stars begin to twinkle above, and the dancers step forward. Their movements are a mesmerizing blend of strength and grace. Men clap and stomp their feet, keeping time with the drums, while women sway and twirl, their anklets chiming with each movement. The sea breeze carries the fragrance of cloves and salt, creating an intoxicating ambience. And as the celebrations reach their peak, you find yourself swept up in the energy of the crowd. You clap along, your feet tapping to the rhythm. The Dao Party is more than just a social gathering. It's a celebration of identity, a tribute to the rich heritage of the Swahili people and their deep connection to the ocean. It's a reminder that for the Swahili, the sea is more than just water. It's a lifeline, a pathway to the world, and an integral part of their being. Today, the Swahili people continue to thrive along the East African coast. Their identity, a vibrant tapestry woven with threads from the Indian Ocean, from Arabia, India, and mainland Africa, remains a testament to their historical legacy. As you watch the sun dip below the horizon, casting long shadows on the water, you realize that the Swahili Dao Party is more than just a celebration. It's a story etched in the waves, a narrative carried on the wind, a poem written in the stars. It's a timeless saga of the Swahili people, their connection to the sea, and their enduring legacy. The journey through the Swahili coast draws to a gentle close. We have walked with young merchants burdened by the risks of sea and storm. We have watched Sultan Syed Said anchor his power in Zanzibar. We have stepped into the fragrant groves of Pemba, and we have sat among the poetry, music, and laughter of coastal elites. But every tale has its ending, or perhaps more accurately, every tale has its fade out. And so let us linger here at the water's edge, as the sky prepares to receive the moon. Do you remember the old man from Stone Town? How he spoke of the wind as if it were an old friend. How he traced the patterns of the stars as if reading a familiar map. There's wisdom in his years, and tonight, under this vast canopy of stars, I want to share some of it with you. He told me once that the sea and the stars up there, they hold memories like polished stones, smooth and hard and filled with light. Memories that have traveled across oceans, carried on the backs of tired waves, and whispered among the constellations. And as I look up at the star-dusted darkness, I think of the Swahili coast not just as a place of gold and ivory and slaves, but as a crossroads of stories. For the sea that cradled these shores also carried tales from distant lands, from China to the banks of the Nile. These waters were a highway of whispers, carrying news of empires rising and falling, of famines and floods, of victories and defeats. The Swahili absorbed these stories, wove them into their songs and prayers, their markets and their palaces. We heard some of those stories in Lemieux, didn't we? How the island's oldest resident, a weathered baobab tree, remembers centuries of human endeavors, of ships coming and going. The Lemieux elders say the baobab is 1,200 years old. That's older than the oldest mosques in the city, older than the very Sultanate of Oman, which rose and fell like the tides. It's easy to forget that behind every grand event, every war and wedding and coronation, there are countless lives lived, hopes held, dreams spun. The Swahili coast was not just a place of commerce. No, it was a world of ideas, of faith and imagination, a meeting point between Africa and the wider ocean. Here in Stone Town, where the bustling crowds faded into the maze of narrow alleys, where the scent of cloves still lingers in the air, we saw glimpses of this vibrant fusion. In the architecture, perhaps, with its elegant Arabic design and African warmth. In the food, where curries and pilafs danced with tropical fruits and fiery chilies. And in the people, with their intricate tales of merchants and mystics, of sultans and slaves, of love and loss. And then there's the poetry. Oh, the poetry of the Swahili coast. If these streets could speak, they would sing. Of Shi Mazinga, the blind poet whose verses flowed like the tides. Of Fadhili, the court poet of Zanzibar, whose words painted pictures of distant lands. We listened to these echoes of the past as the twilight deepened, as the call to prayer echoed from the minarets and the muezzin's voice cut through the stillness like a shard of light. It's a sound that has echoed through these streets for generations, calling people to prayer, yes, but also weaving a sense of community, a shared identity that transcends time. The Swahili coast is a testament to the enduring human spirit, a place where cultures meet and mingle like the flavors in a curry, where faith finds expression in song and verse, and where the sea and the stars hold memories that are both timeless and deeply human. As the lanterns are lit and the stars begin their nightly vigil, I invite you to close your eyes and listen to the whispers of the tide. Let the rhythm of the waves lull you into a state of tranquility, just as it has lulled countless generations of Swahili people into peaceful slumber. Let the memories of the day, the sights and sounds of Stone Town, the poetry and the spices, the laughter and the prayers blend together into a harmonious tune. As the moon ascends its throne in the velvet sky, may it illuminate not just the path ahead, but also the journey you've taken with us through this captivating corner of the world. And when you open your eyes again, may the essence of the Swahili coast linger in your heart, a reminder that even as the day ends, the story of humanity, much like the ocean and the stars, goes on forever. Thank you for walking this path of discovery with us. Your presence has enriched our journey in ways we never imagined. Together, we've explored the vibrant tapestry of the Swahili coast, where the threads of history, culture, and human resilience are masterfully woven. But our adventure doesn't end here, for the spirit of exploration and discovery is alive and well within you. Keep that flame burning brightly, my friends. Let it guide you as you continue to explore the world as hidden gems and the stories that make our world so wonderfully diverse. Until our paths cross again on a new adventure, may the memories of our journey along the Swahili coast bring you joy, and may the spirit of exploration keep you forever curious. Until then, goodbye. You are under Baobab skies.